Okay, so we got our footing, but we can't talk about the microbiome without talking about prebiotics and probiotics, right? But what exactly are these? And do any of them actually make a difference, or is this just all marketing hype? Well, to help cut through the confusion, I sat down with Katz and Dhir, the co-founders of microbiome company Seed. Let's define the term probiotic.
Yep. So probiotics are live microorganisms which confer a health benefit on the host. There's a couple of key definitions that are sub-definitions within that. The first is if it has not been tested in a human population for the claim that's being made, then it is not a probiotic. So that means double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled studies scientifically looking to show that that organism has a probiotic effect. One popular trick that we see a lot of commercial interests and corporations use is they'll test a probiotic strain for one very specific or small or niche outcome, like let's say, I don't know, antibiotic-associated diarrhea, for example. But then they'll position the product as if it has utility for a wide audience preventively or proactively, and there's just no information to suggest that. So I think that we really want to see companies and researchers. This isn't even just a company's thing. This is the term, and in the lexicon is used and thrown around to basically capture any organism which could have a benefit, or that's theoretically could have a benefit, or even just anything that's been fermented. That's how broad this category has gone, where all fermented foods are now being positioned as probiotic too. But
or lysates, right? Like in skincare.
Yeah. So lysates are organisms that are heat killed and then ripped open, and just the cell wall is being used and applied. And those are called probiotic all the time. So it's very, very important that the definition include the organisms being live, being delivered in the appropriate dosages, and having testing done on the indication in the population that it's being marketed to.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back again a little bit to the fact that the term itself is used so loosely, not just on products, but also from a dietary perspective, like Raja mentioned, like fermented foods and beverages. A lot of people just say, I'll drink a kombucha and I don't need to take a probiotic. And I think that's partially just because the term itself has become so diluted. Meanwhile, it's an entire area of inquiry, like within microbiome science. And I think it's especially important too, because in the future, particularly as we look at areas like, fertility, the treatment of pathology and disease, the way we're going to metabolize chemotherapy, the way we're going to think about vaginal health and preterm birth in the developing world. I mean, probiotics have such potential to make a huge impact. And not just because of their health impact, but also from the affordability compared to other medications, the lack of side effects compared to other medications or other complications. We really feel that there's such an important part of our work is not just the science and to create what we believe are some of the most sophisticated and effective products, but to really steward the translation of it and to really be able to call out, evangelism over evidence. If everyone thinks that every tortilla chip you can just throw probiotics on, or your shampoo is just just throw some microbes in, it's a probiotic. Obviously, those things are not going to get taken as seriously. And actually, as a result, when we've seen areas of science where public perception shapes and hinders funding and the ability to move some of these areas forward. And so I think that for us, like part of really big, important part of the mission.
Right. So let's dispel, misconceptions around kind of what the typical sort of thought pattern is or behaviors are around like the products that are currently available.
So fermented foods definitionally are a very different category than a probiotic.
It would be considered a prebiotic,
unless it's been shown to modulate the microbiome. Yeah. It's not even a prebiotic. Yeah. It is just a fermented food. That is the category. And I'll give you an example. So a study was done that did a deep metagenomic sequencing on a kimchi product. And of the 900 or so different strains that were found from the lots that were tested, only 4 are believed to have probiotic potential or were advanced into showing that it has probiotic potential. I think that a lot of the benefits in fermented foods come because the bacteria actually pre-digests a lot of the components in roughage that for some people are very difficult to handle. So,
and they're fibrous.
They're fibrous and they're delicious. So this is not a PSA against fermented foods. We think they're great and certainly have been used in ancestral populations for the purposes of food preservation for a very, very long time. If I didn't have a refrigerator, my diet would be 70% fermented foods.
But the fermentation process itself is bacterial growth, right? Are these not like sort of positive organisms that we want to introduce into our microbiome?
They don't stay there very long. They don't colonize. In fact, I would say more important than the organisms that are used for fermentation are organic acids and fermentation byproducts and some of those metabolites that we believe could be used by the human body to have a health benefit. But these studies are few and far between. And so the research is really, really lacking.
And actually, the way Raj is describing it is like a really important distinction, just because you were talking about how to like break this down for like the general consumer looking at probiotics. It's really important to think about that a microbe could be taken, so you could actually consume bacteria to have a specific effect that it has been studied for, which is very different than the way probiotics are currently marketed, which is this idea that it's good bacteria, that you have some good bacteria, but that you're missing some in your gut, and that you take a probiotic and it puts it back, which is two very different ways of thinking about them. But the scientific definition is the former, which is that you consume bacteria that has been demonstrated to have an effect on the human body. And that's the difference, which is, and where the marketing is right now is this notion that you kind of like restore or put the good stuff back, versus that it has an effect in the body, and that by taking it continuously, because probiotics are, Raja was talking about colonization, which is another good myth to bust, and that there's a lot of people who think that a probiotic must colonize in order to quote unquote work. But in fact, probiotics are transient, which means that they do their work kind of on the road, on their way through your body. And so that's an important distinction that I think a lot of people kind of don't understand.
Yeah. What is the impact in your mind of the decreasing diversity of our biosphere in general, you know, through our soil, through our increasingly toxic environment, the way we, raise animals for food, et cetera, all of these things playing into species extinction, all the way down to single cell organisms and smaller and the like. How does this play into gut health and how we think about these issues?
One of the things that we are looking at from a seed perspective, and we have a division of our company called Seed Labs, which is where we start to look at the way in which microbes could be a part of the solution. So like honeybees are like a really awesome example.
Yeah, you guys are doing something amazing.
Yes. This looks specifically at the impact on the honeybee gut of neonicotinoid pesticides. But on the honeybees, I'll let Raja can speak a little bit more about the science.
I'll start by answering your question. Most people here would know or have heard of this phenomenon called colony collapse disorder, which is, for unexplained reasons, in the last 10 years or so, mass communities of honeybees are just dying off indiscriminately. We don't know why. The populations are on the decline.
Do we really not know why?
We're starting. So that's the hook. The answer is the two leading causes, or the three leading causes, are habitat loss. And habitat doesn't just mean the wild is being less wild. It means monoculture of plants too. So the streamlining of agriculture.
The lack of diversity that exists now in these places. Yes.
The second is a pathogen called foul brood disease. It's a nasty pathogen that kills honeybee babies in the first 3 days of life. And the third are neonicotinoid pesticides, which the EU had banned last year, but the US still allows. And they're called because they operate in the nicotinoid and nicotinic receptor sites in the brain, which etymologically are related to what's found in the tobacco plant. So much so that if you put a suspension of water with glucose and water with neonicotinoid pesticides, honeybees will pick the pesticide water over sugar water. And that's a completely crazy finding. And so what it does is it slowly disorients bees. And when it compounds and aggregates in their bodies, they just get so disoriented that they forget where their hive is. So this thesis was, when these environmental changes happen, the first thing that changes is the microbiome. And so there's a lot of sequencing work that was done. Our chief scientists and our first seed fellow are the ones that are leading these field trials. And we actually found that by reintroducing 3 probiotic organisms back into the bee gut, you can detoxify neonicotinoid pesticides before they're absorbed into the body. So it binds and releases these common pesticides and dampens or protects the immune response as a result of it. But perhaps more impressively, in early bee communities, so bees are becoming something like Japan right now, where there's a lot of old bees but very few young bees. And they dramatically and significantly protect these young bees from crowding out this pathogen, which is so powerful that if it's found, Beekeepers are supposed to go and burn and scorched earth the entire hive to make sure
within
that it doesn't
days.
within days of its discovery,
community.
because it can spread very quickly. Even one spore can spread and result in an epidemic in a neighboring hive. So we published about this. The first paper came out in Scientific Reports in Nature using a Drosophila model. That's a model organism for honeybee populations. Field trials just concluded last year. We made our announcement at the end of last year, and we patented this, but then opened up royalty-free the patent to honeybee farmers around the world. And then we hope at some point this year to roll out biopatties and biosprays that are based off these species after our UC Davis trial commences. And so this is a large-scale field trial in almond farms, which is kicking off in a couple months.
Right. So essentially, it's a probiotic.
Right now, it's a patty. It's like almost like it's like a pancake that you put in the hive. Yep.
Okay, so they eat it in the hive, and that populates their gut flora with something that helps them avoid the negative impacts of these nicotinoid
pesticide and of the foul brood disease. So 2 out of the 3 leading causes of colony collapse disorder.
Right. And just for people that don't know, like paint the picture of colony collapse disorder, at its ultimate.
Yeah, the bees are the most efficient pollinators that have or ever will be discovered or invented. If we lose bee populations, we lose nearly every single blooming crop or fruiting crop that you find. Maybe some in small quantities root vegetables would persist, but a lot of the diversity that you see from above ground pollination are virtually gone. I mean, models that predict it say that the fruits and vegetables aisles of the supermarket would be decreased by over 90% if we lost honeybees.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to say it is whatever you ate for breakfast this morning probably won't be here. And there's also other implications like cotton, for example, that have, of course, other implications for other industries and other uses.
Right. So it really broadens the aperture on the work that you're doing. This is not just, hey, we want to create a probiotic to make people healthy. Like, it's really an effort to address the declining biodiversity of the planet at large, and the implications or the sort of applications of this science that you're developing are really limitless.
And I think also the applications of science that's really often stays kind of guarded, in academic institutions or for many reasons, often doesn't make its way to humans or for other applications that can be immediately kind of put to use and to make an impact. So part of kind of the bridge we've built, I'm very proud of.
Much more to come, of course, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Public Goods, the one-stop shop for sustainable, high-quality, everyday essentials made from clean ingredients at an affordable price. Everything from coffee to toilet paper and shampoo, all the way to pet food even. Public Goods is your new everything store, thoughtfully designed for the conscious consumer. So rather than buying from a bunch of single product brands, Public Goods members can buy all their premium essentials in one place with one beautiful, streamlined aesthetic. These days, I've been loving their refillable shampoo and conditioners. They're awesome. And I just appreciate how Public Goods ethically sources and obsessively develops all of their products to be free of unhealthy ingredients and harmful additives. Knowing what's in your products and where they come from is important. Small changes in the way we shop can make a big impact on personal health and the world at large. So let's get on it, people. Right now, you can receive $15 off your first Public Goods order with no minimum purchase. They are so confident that you will absolutely love their products and come back again and again, that they're essentially giving you $15 to spend on your first purchase. You got nothing to lose. Just go to publicgoods.com/richroll or use code richroll at checkout. That's publicgoods.com/richroll to receive $15 off your first order. And finally, we're brought to you by Outerknown, the makers of my all-time favorite, effortlessly cool and supremely crafted sustainable staples made to last. Founded by pro surfer, global icon at this point, you know this guy, Kelly Slater, Outerknown is setting a much-needed new standard in the fashion industry, making great clothes that don't harm people or the environment. They actually go to great lengths to ensure that all of their fibers are planet-friendly, and they only work with the cleanest factories that pay fair living wages. Lately, I'm all about their blanket shirt. It's just super dang cozy. I think this thing is going to last forever. So when it's time for that wardrobe refresh, I can't recommend more highly going to Sustainable Outerknown's collection of men and women's clothes. This is what's happening now, people. So go to outerknown.com today and enter my code ROLL at checkout, and you'll get 25% off your full price order. That's outerknown.com, outerknown.com. And remember to use my code ROLL at checkout for 25% off. Check them out today. That's outerknown.com. And don't forget promo code ROLL at checkout for 20%.